Welcome back, everybody, to another episode on Selling the Soundtrack, where we break down the sync licensing industry. If you're already making bangers, your music could be making you bank. Today, we're here with Brisson, who leads the sync and licensing department at Cadence Music Group and manages over 30 record labels' master recording rights. He also is a music supervisor at Eggplant Music and Sound. He has gotten sync placements for major brands like Lululemon and Gatorade, as well as tons of TV placements and movie placements on Netflix and Paramount Plus. I just cherry-picked a few of my favorite, but the list goes on. Rich, thanks so much for being here.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Of course. Do you want to share your journey in sync?
My journey in sync, I guess how I got into it? It started, I was in a band. I was in a band called Romeo Liquor Store.
Oh, wow.
We were a pretty hard rocking band based in Toronto. And we had just connected with some people who were a part of a company called Pump Audio, which is like a stock music company that has like this online search engine. So if you're looking for music that you want to use in like a film or a TV show, you can just sort of like go on this site and find some bands. And through that, we started getting some checks that were just showing up in the mail, and it was like, oh, that's pretty cool. And then eventually we started getting requests for like a couple of like skateboard videos and movies and independent films and stuff like that. And you just sort of like pull on the thread and you're like, oh, geez, this is a job. Like people are
People are making money doing this.
People are making money doing this.
Yeah.
And then I always had like a lot of friends that worked in either like video editing or advertising, and just started sort of piecing together the industry, like how commercials all need music and audio and sound, and started interning at a studio, and just sort of worked my way up.
Whoa, okay. So backtrack. When you were in the band, how did you find that first library?
That first that's a good question. I think someone had come to one of our shows.
Yeah, and told you about it.
And had sort of suggested, like, hey, you guys should put your music into this website.
Wow.
And back then, like, those websites, at least I didn't know a lot about them, but they didn't seem as popular. But now there's like 1,000 of them.
Oh, yeah. Where you can just put up your music that's already on Spotify.
Totally,
and have it just sit there.
Yeah, totally. And then this company in particular was bought by Getty Images. And I think our checks got like a little bit bigger when that happened.
Yeah.
And big, I mean, not huge, but,
yeah.
But we were, you could definitely notice like a shift.
Also, just making any kind of money when you're first starting to make music is just great.
Oh, totally, yeah. And I mean, we were going to Montreal a lot. We had gone out to Halifax and New York, and we're sort of doing like that East Coast loop when touring. So that money was huge for like gas and hotels and
just reinvesting,
foods and partying and reinvesting, reinvesting into our band. And that's kind of how it started.
Cool. Yeah. And your journey into music supervision, how did that happen?
Well, it's funny because the first company I interned at was Eggplant. And what they were working on at the time when I got hired, it was sort of like a trial position, and they were working on all the music for the CBC News. So like all those national cues you hear in like Power and Politics and all those news theme cues you hear, they were a part of the company that wrote it. And my job was to sort of like organize it all and get it to the producers. And then that escalated to me then doing stock music searches for commercials, which is like, if you have a lower music budget on a commercial, you have to go through stock music catalogs to find something that works. And then it eventually got to bigger commercials where you're working with like record labels and publishers and licensing bigger songs and working on bigger ads. And then I left Eggplant, and then did a small little stint at DHX, which is now called Wild Brain, which is like a kids programming show. I was in the music department, but found another opportunity. I was actually asked to go over to Cadence to manage the department there. And then I just started pitching to more music supervisors. Like I was on the other side of it now, where you're controlling recording rights. And then our office moved right back next door to Eggplant. I was like, hey, you know what? I started reconnecting with those guys. I was like, I can actually do both. And then when I went back, I had sort of established more of like a film and TV network at Cadence. And then, now it's led into music supervising films over through Eggplant. And then still doing like a lot of biz dev stuff. So bringing in opportunities as well, but also working on projects that come in.
Very cool. Very cool. Do you find it hard to balance both, or like it kind of like they're both the same?
Yeah, they kind of bleed into each other.
Yeah.
It's the music supervision side. You're really receptive of what labels and publishers are doing. Where if you're working at a label or a publisher, you're really trying to get the attention of the music supervisor. So you're really on the label side. If you're on a sync team, you're like the pitcher, where the music supervisor just wants to like gather everything that's cool and great that they think will work in a show. So they're just receiving from everybody. So it's kind of cool when you're working on something and you also represent a catalog. You kind of have an idea of what other labels are sending you. So it does work together. It's sort of like right hand, left hand.
At what point did you find yourself switching over from just searching up stock music? Like, what did you have to change in kind of your strategy?
Oh, I think it was just trust from the people who worked there, right? Like the people who were actually getting who had the clients who needed a team to work on it. Like if you're starting out in an audio post company, like you're kind of you're probably doing a search, but there's someone else also doing a search, just kind of as like a backup.
I've heard that, yeah. Like companies will hire a couple of different like supervisors or teams, and then kind of choose the best one from all of them. So it's not like I had this one supervisor explain that it's not a for sure payday, because even though you're hired for the gig, it doesn't mean you're getting paid, because they might not use the songs that you pitch.
Yeah, that's true. A lot of what Eggplant does was kept in house, so it was mostly like the staff that was searching. So I think when you start, if anyone that's looking to get into it, if you're getting an internship and you have opportunities to search on a commercial or a show or anything, and whatever you're picking is getting licensed and getting picked, like it shows that you actually have like sort of like an ear for it. And I think that's just sort of what happened. You get these opportunities to search through catalogs, and you're not going through like, you missed the mark, or we need another round, like you're actually getting what the brief is calling for. And I think that just shows the people that you're working for that they can trust you, and you actually know how to like pick the right songs, and and picking the songs is one thing, then you got to go clear them.
Yeah, there's so much admin.
Yeah, tons of admin. Yeah, and then I also edit and will mix, so that helps.
Okay. Edit as in cut downs?
So you get a song, and then you get the commercial just with like a voiceover, or just clean with no music, and then you have to edit the music in.
Oh. Okay.
And then that way, when you're presenting it to your client, it's like, here's 10 songs, but you could have 10 songs and you think they work, but when they're cut to the picture, it's
different.
Yeah, it's different. It's it just kind of sells it a little better.
Oh, whoa. So you're making like hypothetical reels.
Yeah, kind of, yeah. Oh. Yeah, you're just showing like what your commercial would look like with 10 different music feels.
Interesting.
So.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Can you walk me through one of the most memorable moments in your career?
Memorable moments in my career. Let me see. We had this one artist named Dan Griffin a long time ago. He used to be a part of the Arkells, and had left the band and just sort of started his own solo project. And he has this album that has these like just sort of really like authentically raw sounding songs. Like there's just like there's a quality about it that just sounds like really unique. And we had pitched it to Canadian Tire one year for their Christmas holiday commercial spot, and they loved it so much that they went back the next year to use Dan Griffin again.
Oh.
And then we licensed him again, and then it was just another song off that album.
Wow, what a pat on the back also.
Yeah, it was great.
Because they definitely had a great experience to be like, let's redo that again.
Totally, yeah. And it was, I remember it was like one of the first songs we sent to them, and they were like, oh, well, this is it. And then typical like advertising, they were just like, okay, well, this is it, but like, let's try to beat it. Like, what else do we got? And then we sent like hundreds more, and then they just kept with that one that we had originally sent.
Yeah.
Which is great. And then the next year, they're just like, yeah, we want more Dan Griffin. So we actually had them, you know, send us like everything he had, and they picked another one off that record. Yeah, which was I don't know, I thought that was pretty cool.
That's very cool. Yeah. Do you ever produce with artists too, like for that example, because you knew what they wanted and you knew the artist? Did you help with the creation process at all?
I don't really get into that part, but there are producers that I work with that do. We at Cadence, we have an A&R team too, who's kind of more involved in that. But it definitely happens where we'll get songs from artists that are out and like recorded, and then we'll ask for the stems and sort of rearrange them a little bit.
Okay.
We actually at Cadence, we actually just landed a Hyundai commercial.
Oh, nice.
For an old '90s band called Sky Diggers.
Okay.
And for that one, that was like that song was released in 1990, and they needed stems, which they didn't have. So we had to use a AI software called Audio Shake to kind of break the stems down.
Yeah. Did it sound okay?
Yeah, it sounded really good.
Oh, okay, nice.
And you pay per like stem sort of thing, but it's worth it if you're going to land this commercial, right?
Yeah, for sure. I've used a couple of AI separating tools, and the ones I've used don't sound that great, but maybe because it's just not professional grade.
Yeah, try Audio Shake. They're cool. Okay. Shout out to Audio Shake.
Shout out, please sponsor.
Please sponsor, yeah. They just, and it's a kind of, first I heard about it was like I want to say either 2019 or 2021. It was probably 2021. The pandemic made things really blurry.
Oh, yeah. We lost like 3 years.
We lost 3 years. Yeah, that doesn't really count.
Yeah.
But I met one of those people at like a conference or, you know, like some sort of event and tried it, and it was just like, whoa, this is actually pretty awesome.
Yeah.
And it actually helped to land this commercial because we wouldn't have landed it if it wasn't for that, because they needed the edit. If you're working with like a 30-second, 1 minute window, you only have so much room to play with the song, right? So they needed the vocal to move, and like they just needed to do some edits that were not possible with just the full mix of the song.
Yeah.
So that was a saver for that.
Yeah. When you get clients that ask for things that seem impossible, can you like counter how do I say this? Like make a counter offer. So like, for example, if you weren't able to separate those stems, could you have offered to like make a cover version and redo all the things and then offer like a lower rate? Like how would that?
Yeah, we did actually before we sort of tried Audio Shake. The problem is that we were only controlling the master. So if they would have made a cover, then we would have lost out on the license.
Oh, I see.
But that's why publishers are always sort of sitting in a little bit of a better spot when it comes to licensing and film TV, because if that situation comes up, you need to cover, then they still have the songwriting credits, like they own the publishing, they own the idea of the song, right? So if you do a cover, it's kind of like, oh, cool, we're still getting paid, but the recording side is different.
Yeah, so you're not cashing in as much as you can.
No.
Yeah.
But we did offer just to kind of keep it still in play.
Yeah, and it's just show that you're trying also. It's just like...
Show that you're trying, and at one point they were considering a cover, and they actually did do a cover for Quebec, because if you're licensing music in Canada, when it plays in Quebec, they like to use... their own talent, so it's unionized in Quebec. So you need to use a French union singer within the context of a commercial.
Whoa.
So we had to do a cover, and they had a French singer named Mary Lou, who's a Quebec-based singer-songwriter.
Yeah.
Who's awesome too. Shout out to Mary Lou.
Shout out. Shout
out. And then they had her redo the song, and then the audio post house who did it redid the song, like the music portion, and then they had Mary Lou sing the lyrics. But yeah, so that happens.
If you could go back in time, would you change anything in your career?
In my career, I'd change a lot of things. Not just for my career, but geez, look at the world today. No.
Gonna get all philosophical on here.
Get all philosophical. If I can go back in time and change anything, I think right in the beginning when I was really trying to get into audio post-production, I was really sort of like driven to get into that field. And there was a few times where I was offered internships at advertising agencies, but I just wanted to keep my focus and stay within the audio post realm. But now looking back, I think if I would have taken an internship at an advertising agency, I would have kind of seen a little bit closer about how that whole process works on their side, which you kind of learn from outside looking in, but if you're on the inside kind of looking out, it's a little different.
And I heard there's a lot of money in advertising and commercial.
Sure, yeah, there can be for sure. But I'm happy with where I landed. I think if there was any sort of thing I would have done is maybe tried different internships when they were offered, as opposed to being so narrow with where I wanted to go. But I mean, then on the other side, if you're narrow with your direction and you know where you want to go, then just go there. So,
were you looking for internships, or they mostly came to you?
Oh no, I'm definitely looking.
You were definitely looking.
Oh yeah. I mean, you'd send out emails to everybody and get one reply.
Yeah.
Just saying, no, sorry, we're not hiring.
Yeah.
And you just got to keep going. That's the tricky thing about this business is like you need to
have thick skin.
Yeah, you need to have thick skin. You need to, especially when you're first starting out, like one of the hardest things is getting in, right? And then once you're in, you sort of meet a lot of people, and it's such a relationship-based thing.
Yeah,
that
100%.
Well, it's like even before this, like we were talking about who else you have coming on here.
Yeah, just everybody knows everybody.
And everybody knows everybody, right? So it's kind of one of those things, like it's hard to get in, but once you do get in and you can, stick around and stick it out and work hard, then yeah, it'll pay off eventually. It's just one of those things. It's that foot in the door is really tricky.
100%. Do you have advice for listeners who are mostly musicians listening, trying to get their foot in the door? Do you have advice for them?
Yeah, so musicians who are looking to get their songs placed. Yeah, I mean, if you're gonna work, I mean, there's a few different ways. If you're independent, you could approach record labels and publishers. First off, you can look for a deal, but if that's not, I mean, that's easier said than done. But a lot of the record labels and publishers have sync teams, and they just necessarily, not all of them work with just their catalog. If they find that you have potential for a placement in TV or film, they'll sign you to a non-exclusive deal, and at least you have like a rep and someone pitching for you, as opposed to you just pitching. If you do decide to pitch for yourself, research is very important. If you're a hip-hop artist and you're, let's say this, if you're a rock artist and you're pitching on a show that only uses hip-hop, like that's not
a good fit.
It's not a good fit, right? So you need to pitch for where your music fits. So just sort of doing like a blanket blast out. I mean, it's cool to know who you are, but if you're looking for specific placements, it's important to do your research. And then you can look on like IMDb and Variety and like just other like publications that show you like what's in production. Well, in Canada, like every province has like Ontario Creates, for instance, here. Like they show you what's in production and they show you like what's filming. So if you see that, I don't know, your favorite show is filming in Ontario or in Toronto somewhere, then you know that eventually that show, when it's filmed, is going to go into post-production, and then they're going to start looking for music. So that's a good opportunity to sort of
reach out.
Yeah, reach out and say, hey, I know you use a lot of hip-hop or indie rock or jazz or whatever type of music you are, and here, check out my band.
So pretty much just do research and reach out a lot, and don't give up.
Don't give up, yeah. TuneFind's a good shout out to TuneFind. TuneFind is a good website too. So if, like, obviously you can't sit there and watch hours of TV to know what a vibe is, but if you go on TuneFind, it's sort of like a database of every song that's used in a TV show. So if you're looking at like Euphoria and you're like, what song was this? It goes season by season and then episode by episode of like all the songs that were used.
Oh, wow.
So it's like, okay, well, what
you could just make a Spotify playlist and listen to that during your workout, just passively, and then understand instead of sitting there watching the show
and understand what the vibe is. Totally. And then if you notice, like, it's like there's a lot of shows that just use music from like the 60s and 70s and like a lot of like vintage recordings. So you know if that's the vibe, then they're not gonna they're not picking anything else but that, right? There might be the odd time that they do, but that's like so rare. But yeah, it just kind of gives you like an idea of what they're using. Way back when there was a music supervisor named David Heyman who was working on a show called Kim's Convenience. And Kim's Convenience really aimed to just use Toronto artists that were sort of more local, but all over the map, like hip hop to indie rock to folk to like heavier bands, and but the focus was Toronto. So if you know you're a Vancouver-based musician or American, like you might not have a shot at getting the show, but if you're a Toronto musician, then
that's a huge opportunity.
Might as well
reach out. Yeah,
sure. So it's like little things like that. Right, just kind of learning
and researching.
Yeah.
Cool. Are there certain characteristics that make a track more appealing for sync?
Yeah, I mean, it's always tricky to license something with a lot of swearing in it.
Yeah, don't make it explicit or cut out the swear words.
Yeah, or if you do have a song like that, you know, have a clean version too when you're recording it. That always helps. Instrumentals help because there's like a rule when you're mixing TV or any sort of like film that dialogue is king, and anything that sits under it is can't be fighting the dialogue. So when you're mixing for television, you're always mixing to the dialogue. Like you want your dialogue to really stand out first, and then anything conflicting with that just doesn't feel good when you're watching it, you know. So instrumentals help because if you have like a really strong singer on a track and a really dialogue heavy scene, then they're going to tend to conflict a little bit. So having instrumentals is important.
When submitting to supervisors, could producers make an alt version where they like EQ duck like all of the mid-range and then be like, here's another version? So like you have your instrumental, you have your main version, and then you have like a voiceover version. Is that a thing?
So like the artist is doing that? Or I wouldn't really say that comes up too often. Because if you wanted to do any sort of like EQing to the track, that'll usually happen in the audio post process, like when they're mixing the show.
I see.
So a lot of times, not a lot of times, but it does come up sometimes where the engineer mixing a show will want the stems of a song just because they feel they can get a better mix. And maybe the original mix of a song, the bass is sticking out too much or the drums are sticking out too much or something like that. And it's kind of fighting the scene a little bit. So maybe in the actual mix of the track, they'll duck the drums down or duck whatever down, right? Maybe bring the vocals up. Who knows, right? But and there's always like, I'm working on a movie right now where there's scenes where they're like in a warehouse and there's a party next door. So it's like we need music that's coming through the wall, and then you hear it mixed in, and it's just like totally muffled as if it's coming through the wall, right? So they would do that.
To make it fit. Okay. And are there green flags when musicians are reaching out to like you as a supervisor? Are there certain things that when you see that you're kind of like, okay, I want to work with this person, or like it gives them a better chance of working with you? Sure.
Yeah, I think if you have comparables to what you sound like, that helps, and you put that forefront in your email, that helps a lot, because then I can already sort of get an idea of what you sound like without actually having to listen. Or you just, you know right away, or sort of have like an expectation right away. It's always helpful too when you sort of lay out clearly where your rights are sitting. Like if you own your masters but you don't own your publishing, like you're signed to a publisher, it's important to say like, hey, so these are my masters, but I'm signed with Third Side or Arts and Crafts or whoever, right?
And put that in the email.
Sure, yeah.
Okay.
Usually if you're signed to a publisher, they'll have a sync team, both those companies do, and they'll pitch for you. Yeah, I mean, it's important to sort of lay out clearly like where, if you're going to use my music, this is how you go clear it.
I see.
Right, so it's And samples too are a big one, where a lot of artists will, especially in the hip hop community, that you're using, it's very sample based or can be very sample based.
Mm-hmm.
It's important to note which, if you're using like a very famous sample, but it's sort of tucked under the mix and you can't really hear it, still need to know and highlight that and
mention it.
Sure, yeah, and and maybe have a version where you're not using that sample if you can.
Right.
Because that'll just amplify
make it easier.
Yeah, it just makes it so much easier to license your music.
True.
Yeah, people like music supervisors they like
ease.
Easy. Yeah, sure. The song is always going to win, and they're always going to dig in to clear. Sometimes you have tracks that have like 7 writers with 7 different publishers, and you need to get them all to agree. But and that's a part of it. But if there's songs that are just one stop, or one company, maybe 2, it's pretty ideal. It's pretty easy to get through it.
So a lot of musicians use Disco to pitch music.
Yeah.
And for listeners, it's pretty much a platform that you upload your music to, and it's kind of like the gold standard in the sync industry when you're pitching. But what I've done is like put all of that information in Disco in like the metadata section, but coming from a supervisor's perspective, it's better to put it in the email, because like you're not checking all of the tabs on Disco.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay.
Yeah. You can put it in both. The thing about Disco is that when a supervisor is searching through their catalog, so they're receiving all this music and they're ingesting it into Disco, and then say if they're working on another show or another scene or something, and they want, something that's like pensive and gentle or something, they'll put those terms in there into their search in Disco, and then a bunch of pensive, just knock the mic. A bunch of pensive tracks will come up,
Yeah.
So that's an easy way. I know a lot of them have like if you're setting up like news blasts and stuff like that, they'll have like a separate email folder, and then go to that email folder and type in those terms, like I need something energetic, quirky, whatever. So if it's in your email, it's
even better when they're searching their email.
Sure, yeah, because then they're kind of using their email like a search engine too, right? But Disco too, it's important to put it on. The more metadata you can do, obviously not going overboard, but the more places you can put it, the better.
Yeah, just so it's more easily searchable.
Sure, yeah.
Are there any pitfalls that musicians usually fall into when pursuing sync?
I guess just like blasting out to everybody. It always comes up. You always hear people saying like, if you pitch me a song and say, this is the best song that will work in your commercial, or this is the best song that will work in your show.
It's so vague.
And it's so vague, I know, but and if it's like way off,
yeah,
then it just sort of shows like, okay, well, you don't know what I'm working on, A, or B, like,
you don't care.
You don't care. You're just sort of like copying and pasting that email, and sending it to a bunch of people. Yeah, I found that music supervisors don't really like to be told what's going to work.
Fair enough. Don't tell me what to do.
Yeah, sort of, yeah. And it's kind of like, and there's a reason for that, because it's not just them deciding what's going to be in there, right? Like they need to go back to the production team and like the showrunner and the exec producer and kind of be like, okay, is this the vision that we're all creatively sharing, right?
There's a lot of cooks in the kitchen.
Sure, yeah. So when you get this random person emailing you and saying like, this will work best in your show, it's like, well, I don't know. Will it?
Okay, so noted. That's a red flag. Do not use that verbiage.
Yeah, and that comes up. For me, it's kind of like, I appreciate the confidence. Sure, tell me that. And maybe it will, but I'll try it. Pitch it, and you say, the artist said this would work best, but...
I don't know, guys.
I don't know. But, I've heard a lot of music supervisors say that before. So maybe just, don't do that.
Yeah. And I've also heard that, like, getting bombarded with emails isn't fun either.
No.
Like, do you have, like, a number where you're kind of like, this is it? Like, I need to, like, report spam.
It's, you don't want to bombard people if they're not replying. Like, they're not
replying for a reason, yeah.
Yeah, it could be. Or it's also possible that they see that email come in and they organize it in a different way where they just don't need to reply to it right now. It's like, cool, you know, it would be nice to get that cool, we'll check it out, thanks email back. But, you know, people are people. That doesn't always happen, right?
For sure.
And people have different ways of communicating on email too, you know? Like some people are more receptive and communicative than others.
Yeah.
And, you know, if you're using Disco, you can see if they've opened it and listened to it. But if they haven't, you know, maybe one follow-up is enough to kind of say, like, hey, just a reminder, I sent you this. Like, maybe they just don't need that at that time. Maybe they're not working on anything at that time, too, right?
Yeah.
So.
And just wait, like, a week.
Wait, like, a week. And again, it goes back. It's like the hardest thing is getting your foot in the door, right?
Yeah.
And I guess, like, every sync is almost like getting a foot in the door.
Yeah.
And then once you, you know, it's happened a lot where you send a music supervisor a band and then they fall in love with that band and then they come back and license multiple tracks from that band. Now they're just organically and naturally and truthfully like a fan of that band and want to kind of support them, right? So yeah, it's kind of one of those things, like, it goes back to like the thick skin. And maybe just assume that they saw it and they just don't need it now.
Yeah.
Because it happens all the time too, where I'll send stuff and then months later they reply.
Oh, wow.
And it's like, yeah, okay, well, we found a place for this. It's like, whoa, I thought you totally deleted that email.
You never responded.
Yeah, so. I thought it was on the blocked list. But yeah, it happens. Yeah.
Cool. So yeah, don't spam. That first email is kind of important. Like, do your research and just send something nice.
Yeah. Do your research. Say, hey, I saw, you know, and even say, like, I saw on TuneFind you use a lot of ambient jazz music, and I'm an ambient jazz artist from Toronto. You know, here, check out my artist, check out my band. I think that will go so much further than just,
this is the best song.
This is the best song that's going to work for your project. Yeah. Although I do like that confidence.
This is the best song in this genre that you'll ever hear.
Yeah. Good for you.
Do you have any projects that you want to shout out that you're working on right now that you're excited about?
Well, the High End Eye commercial was really cool, so shout out to that. Shout out to Sky Diggers for landing that. There's been some cool placements we've been getting on the new Chucky series.
Cool.
Well, it's not new, it's the new season 3 of Chucky. So we had a really cool placement for one of our artists, Prince Paris, where there was like the actors on scene were interacting with the song and he was sort of like voicing it for his girlfriend. It was just like, that is like, I've never landed a sync like that. That's so cool. So shout out to that. Doing a lot of Lifetime, doing 2 movies right now with, I know for sure one's Lifetime. I don't know if the other one is, but sort of like these teen drama movies. And there's like a ton of music in that. And they're just sort of like, I want to like say like there's like these after school special type movies. So those are fun. I don't know if I can. It's still kind of like a project in motion, so they're not done. So I can't really give a shout out to anyone yet.
Yeah.
Well, it's just like nothing's confirmed yet. So, but there's been a ton of artists that have been submitting some really really cool stuff. Cool. But yeah, I think there's, now that the strikes have sort of lifted or settled, I'm definitely seeing more American briefs coming in. So that definitely sucked for a lot of people working in the business, especially a lot of people who do a lot of U.S. business. It just sort of stopped. It like the strikes hit, and then the films that were still in post-production were still rolling. So it was kind of like, okay, well, you know, it's not really slowing down just yet, but it's coming, you know, if this goes any longer. And then all of a sudden it just sort of went, meow.
Yeah.
And then it's going to take a while to ramp back up again.
Yeah.
I would think, because now everything's starting to go back into production. And then you got to think, like, on the music side, you're sort of like the last piece of that puzzle, right?
Yes.
So, yeah, there's a lot of work that needs to happen before you get to the music side.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but you're starting to see people load up more on just playlists and getting ready for that boom. So
getting prepped.
Yeah, getting prepped. Yeah. So next summer will be interesting.
We'll be busy.
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure it will be.
Yeah. And any last words or any bits of advice before we wrap up the app?
Yeah, I think For anyone who's looking to get into music licensing and audio post-production and even like composers, there's a ton of events and networking opportunities that you can go to. Again, it's a really tricky thing to get into, but it is very much a relationship business. So the more people you know, the better. I think Music Publishers Canada is an amazing association in Canada who supports and advocates for songwriters in Canada, and they're always hosting like these next gen events.
Cool.
So shout out to Music Publishers Canada, big time, because they help the Canadian sync industry a lot. They set up a lot of meetings with international music supervisors, and in Canada we're lucky we have access to a lot of funding for that sort of thing. Just if you're starting out and you really want to kind of get in, come to some events, send some emails, and if you're not getting replies right away, just keep at it. I mean, it's the trickiest thing is to get in. So.
I've heard of other like PRO events too. I think ASCAP hosts events, but that's an American PRO.
That's an American PRO.
Yeah.
But I mean, if for any U.S. listeners, that's a great one to go to.
Yeah.
Sort of be involved. For us in Canada, it's SOCAN.
Yeah. Do they host events?
They have.
Okay.
Yeah. They may even be hosting events that I'm not aware of. If they are, it'd be listed on their website. SEMA is another association based in Canada who sometimes does events too.
Okay.
But I would check, follow them on Instagram and check their websites. They always update, especially on their socials, to kind of show new opportunities to go meet people. You got to put yourself out there and meet some people, and it's kind of how it starts.
Yeah.
I know for a lot of people that's really uncomfortable, but
you can't be a hermit in this industry.
Yeah, you can't.
That's just not how it goes.
Yeah, but once you get hired, you can totally hermit all you want.
Yeah. Like before, I was my main work was producing for artists, so I could kind of hermit and leave my condo sometimes to be in the studio. But switching into sync is very you need to be on phone calls. You need to kind of be meeting up with people. You need that connection.
Oh, totally. And it's so good to just, on the sync side, like the pitching side, it's so good to have those music supervisor contacts where you can feel comfortable and are on a level with, where you can just be like, yo, you got anything going on? Like, any scenes open? And they're just like, and they'll be honest with you and say like, no, but if you check back in a month, I got this show coming, or, and again, it's those relationships and that back and forth, right?
Yes.
And it's really helpful to just sort of stay on top of.
For sure. And like when people join like an agency or a label or a library, it's better not to ghost. It's kind of like once you make that connection, reach out every so often and be like, hey, what's up? Like, do you have any projects that are a good fit for like what I do?
Sure, yeah.
And where can people find you?
Where can people find me? Well, I'm not the most active on social media, but I do have an Instagram account.
Okay, let's shout out.
Just my name. My handle's @Riche. Just my name, Rich Brisson.
Yeah, I'll put that in the description as well.
Sure.
Thanks so much for listening, guys. Don't forget to follow Selling the Soundtrack on socials. Share, like, sub. We're on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. Thanks so much, guys, and thanks so much, Rich.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Take care, guys. Peace.